Tonight, I want to tell you a story about a kingdom under the ground. There is a small town on the surface with lampposts and a bench and an old bug who sits by the well and remembers when the town was full. And below the town, down the well, in the dark, is everything else. A whole kingdom, empty now and asleep and beautiful in the way that only very old and very quiet places are beautiful. It is a story told in pieces because that is how the kingdom tells it, in scraps of stone and half-remembered songs, and every piece stands on its own. So if you drift off in one cavern and wake up in another, you have lost nothing. The kingdom will still be there. It has been waiting a very long time. Let me take you down then. Slowly, past the old bug on the bench and over the lip of the well and into the dark where the lamps still glow and the rain has never stopped. The town is called Dirtmouth. It sits in a barren valley at the top of the world, out of the wind, and it is nearly empty. Lumafly lamps light the streets, soft and pale, and most of the houses are shuttered, and there is one resident left, an old bug called Elderbug, who stands by the well and will tell you, if you stop, what happened to everyone else. Our town's fallen quiet, you see, he says. The other residents, they've all disappeared. Headed down that well, one by one, into the caverns below. Drawn, he says, by the promise of wealth or glory or enlightenment. And they did not come back up. He does not go down. He is not the sort. He stands by the well and greets whoever comes and worries about them and watches them go over the edge and waits, and that is Elderbug, and I have always found him one of the kindest things in the whole story, precisely because he does nothing. He keeps the town. Someone has to. When the traveler this story is about arrives, small and silent, with a nail on their back and no name at all, he tells them about the well and about the kingdom below and about the sickness down there, and he does not try to stop them. He only says, "Come back and tell me what you found." He means it. He will still be there. So picture the town at night before we go down. The lamps, the bench, the one lit window, a single old bug in a coat by a stone well, listening to the wind that cannot quite reach him, and a small figure at the well's edge looking down into the dark. That is where every visit to Hallownest begins. Rest there a moment. Nothing has been asked of you. The well will still be there when you are ready. Under the kingdom there are roads, and under the roads there are tunnels, and through the tunnels once ran the stags. Great gray beasts, saddled, that carried the bugs of Hallownest from station to station across the whole kingdom faster than any road, and one of them is still there. The last stag, the story calls him because he is. Old and gray and enormous and glad in a slow rumbling way to be rung for because it has been a very long time since anyone rang the bell. It was a long time ago, he says, standing in the crossroads station with the ferns coming up between the rails, but I remember when these highways and crossroads pulsed with life. He remembers all of it. Which stations were busiest? Who rode where? That the resting ground station carried mourners up to their rituals, and now, he supposes, the dead conduct their own. He remembers his own kind, and that they were many, and that he does not know what became of them, and he says all of this without complaint, between one station and the next, carrying a small silent passenger who cannot answer. He becomes, over the course of the story, the way the night gets about, and he is one of the true comforts of the game, the bell, the rumble in the tunnel, the great gray head coming out of the dark, and the ride, and the small talk at the other end. He tells you, once, that he thinks there might be one more station, somewhere, sealed, that he has never seen. There is. If you find it and open it, he goes to it and stands in it, and it is a nest, and there are eggs in it, and one of them, he says, may yet hatch. He is very quiet about that. So am I. Rest in the stag station with the ferns and the rails and the bell. He will come when you ring. He always does. It is a long way, and he does not mind. Before the kingdom, and long before the town, there were others in that place. The story barely remembers them. An ancient civilization, it calls them, in the same caverns, who did something no one since has done. They worshipped no king, and no light, and no power. They worshipped the darkness itself, the substance at the very bottom of the world, in a pit below everything, which the story calls the void. Inspired or mad, a hunter's journal says of them. Those ancient bugs. They devoted their worship to no lord, or power, or strength, but to the very darkness itself. And then they were gone. No one says why. They left their idols in the deep, and their idols are all we have. I tell you about them first, because the whole story is a story about light and dark, and everyone in it chooses a side, and the ones who chose the dark were here before anyone, and left first, and are the least understood. The void they worshipped is still down there. It is a sea at the bottom of a chasm, and it is restless, and it is not evil, exactly, or good. It is only what is left when everything else is taken away. Hold that. It comes back at the very end, and when it does, it is on the side of the small one from the well. Above their vanished shrines, in the bare rock, and the fossils, and the stray roots, in a place the story calls the ancient basin, someone else would one day build a palace. But not yet. For a long time after the dark worshippers left, there was nothing down there but the rock, and the roots, and the sound of water finding its way through stone. Let it be quiet a while. It was quiet for a very long time. At the eastern edge of the caverns, there is a place where ash falls, always, white and slow, out of the dark above, and settles on everything, and it is called Kingdom's Edge, and the ash has a source. Long ago, a creature came there to die. A Wyrm. One of an ancient race of enormous beings, larger than any bug, gifted with a little foresight, a glimpse of what was to come. And it lay down in that canyon, and shed its great shell, and, the story says, became something smaller. This ashen place is grave of Wyrm, an old creature who still lives there will tell you. Once told, it came to die. But what is death for that ancient being? More transformation, methinks. The falling ash is the shell. Its molt still shedding so slowly that the whole region has been snowing quietly for as long as anyone remembers. And the thing that stepped out of the shell was pale and small and bright, and it went west, into the caverns where the bugs lived without thought, as beasts, and it did something for them, or to them. It woke their minds, gave them thought and speech and the ability to want things. And in return, it asked for their devotion, and it promised them a kingdom that would last forever. The Wyrm becomes beacon, a tablet in its palace says. Minds expanded to yield, to devote. Eternity and promise. They called it the Pale King. They worshipped it as the god who had made the world, though it had not only woken it. It was reclusive. Very few ever saw it. But its idols were in every house, small pale figures carved to suit their owner, and its roads ran everywhere, and its stagways, and its trams, and above its hidden palace a great city rose. That is the founding of Hallownest, and it is, if you strip the light off it, a story about a very old creature choosing to be small so that it could be loved. Sleep on that. The ash is still falling on the far side of the kingdom. It always is. The Pale King had a queen. She was a root, a pale one, a higher being like him, and the story calls her the White Lady, and she was tall and quiet and grew the way a tree grows, slowly and in one place. She was the mother, in a way I will explain when we are further down and you are further asleep, of every vessel in this story, and she carried a shame about that which she never set down. She had a garden. It had been the land of a tribe of moss-covered bugs, and she took it and made of it a retreat, walled and guarded and thick with flowers, and lumafly lanterns along the paths, and greenhouses, and it is overgrown now, and thorny, and full of the wrong sort of visitor, and the lanterns still, faintly, light paths that nobody tends. Cornifer, the map-maker, will tell you about it, humming. Have you heard of Hallownest's queen? Apparently these gardens were once her retreat. Now some vicious types are crawling all over the place, and the plants have grown wild. And at the heart of the garden, when the small one from the well finally reaches her, the White Lady is still there, bound, wrapped in bindings of her own making, in a cocoon, in the green dark, and if you take her for a prisoner, she will correct you gently. Do I seem prisoner here? If so, it is not by any choice but my own. These bindings about me I've chosen to erect. There is some shame I feel from my own part in the deed, and this method guarantees its cease. That is all she will say about it at first. Let her rest in her garden. She has been resting there since the kingdom fell, and she is not unhappy, exactly. She is only sorry. Sorry can be very restful if you sit still with it long enough. The Pale King did not make his kingdom out of nothing. There were peoples already in the caverns, with their own gods in their own ways, and each of them met the new light differently, and the story remembers how. There were the moths in the graveyard grounds in the east, who had been born from a light of their own, an old goddess of dream and warmth, and who, when the pale new light appeared, forgot her. Turned their backs to her, one of the last of them says, sadly, forsook the light that spawned them. Forgot it even. Hold that. It is the seed of everything that goes wrong. There was the Mushroom Clan, down in the humid caverns of the fungal wastes, creatures not quite bug and not quite plant, who accepted the king willingly because he could see a little way into the future, and they trusted that. There was the Hive, far off, with its queen, who kept to itself. There were the Mantises, in their village, at the bottom of the fungal groves, proud, fast, deadly, older than the kingdom, who did not love the king, and never would, but who made a treaty. They would keep their village and their ways, and in exchange they would stand at the border and hold back what lived beyond it. The truce remains, their tablet says. Our vigil holds. The beasts are kept at bay. And beyond that border was Deepnest. Web-choked, twisting, black in places, even a lantern cannot reach, home to the spiders and to a tribe of weavers who had come from somewhere else long ago and ruled by a queen called Herrah the Beast, and Deepnest refused the king entirely. When he tried to run a tram line into it, his workers were driven off and the line was left unfinished, and it still is. That is Hallownest. A pale king, a rooted queen, and a handful of older peoples who said yes, or made terms, or said no. Sleep on the Mantises, at their border, spears in hand, holding a line for a king they never liked. They keep their word. That is the whole of them, and it is enough. In its prime, it was simply called the capital, or the city at this kingdom's heart, and it was built in an enormous cavern beneath a lake, and there is a tablet in the crossroads that still invites you down to it. Travelers of Hallownest, it says, descend through verdant wilds and fungal groves to the city at this kingdom's heart. There all wishes shall be granted, all truths revealed. Pilgrims came from every corner. The pilgrim's way ran to it. Goods flowed in from the whole kingdom, and, the story notes with a little edge, almost nothing ever flowed back out. It was tall. Towers with wide windows. A wealthier district in the east, in reds and purples, and a plainer one in the west, in blue. Lamps on the bridges. And above it, in a spire, a watcher named Lurian with a telescope, keeping an eye on all of it, recording who came and went, and beneath it, deeper than anyone but the king's own went, the hidden white palace itself. 5 great knights stood beneath the throne as the kingdom's protectors, the old manual says. Their names are half remembered. One of them, a knight who fought with, of all things, dung, will turn up much later and be lovely. Its real name is lost. that is one of the small sad things about the story. Nobody alive remembers what the capital was called before it became what it is now, which is a city where it rains, always, indoors, because the lake above has cracked the cavern roof and leaks through, and the rain falls on the empty bridges and the towers and the fountain in the square, and so the city is called, now, only for what happened to it, the City of Tears. But that is later. Tonight, for a moment, it is dry. The lamps are lit. Someone is crossing a bridge with a parcel. Hold that. It was a good city. People wanted to go there. Here is where it turns, and it turns on something very small. At the very top of the mining mountain, on a peak the story calls Hallownest's crown, there was a statue. Old. Forgotten. Of a winged being with a face like the sun. The moths had left it there long ago, before they forgot her, and then they forgot the statue too, and the mountain grew crystal around it, and nobody climbed that high, and it stood in the wind, and it remembered. Her name is the Radiance. She was the light the moths were born from, older than the king, a being of dream, brighter, the story says, than the essence dreams are made of. And she had not died when they forgot her. A memory of her lingered in that statue in the crown of the mountain, and as the kingdom below grew golden and busy and sure of itself, the memory began, very slowly, to spread. Bugs across Hallownest started to dream of a light they did not recognize. Warm, blazing, offering something. What she offered in the dreams was union. To be joined with her and with each other in her light forever. And the price was thought. To join her was to stop being a self. And the bugs of Hallownest, who had been given their minds by the king and were proud of them, resisted. They fought the pull of the dream. And that resistance, the story is careful to say, is what the sickness was. Not the light itself. The struggle against it. It came out through them, orange and hot, and it took their bodies. Let me say that once more, because it is the strangest thing in this kingdom's history, and the truest. The plague was not the goddess. It was a whole people trying not to remember her. Leave the statue on the crown for now. The wind is on it. The crystals below it are singing, very softly, the way the crystals of that mountain do if you stop and listen, and the light in the statue's face is only a memory, and it is patient. It has been forgotten before. It knows how to wait. The story calls it the ancient sickness, or the plague, or simply the bright light. It came slowly. First, a hunter's journal says they fell into deep slumber. Then they awoke with broken minds, and then their bodies started to deform. Orange in the eyes, and orange under the shell, and a swelling, and in the worst of it, no more sense of danger at all. Nothing anyone tried helped. No ritual, no prayer. And the kingdom's great knights, who had never lost a fight, found there was nothing to swing at. We knights defend against the physical, one of them says, years later, still baffled by it. But a formless enemy. How to defeat such a foe? Some resisted, and the story marks them. The Mantises, whose defiance was so complete that the sickness could not get a hold, and who kept their minds and their honor, and who therefore, when one of their own gave in and embraced the light, cast him out. A hermit at the kingdom's edge, who retreated to a quiet canyon to get away from it, and did. And there was a belief among the sick, which the story records as belief and not as fact, that the harder you fought it, the faster it took you. Which, if you think about where the sickness came from, has a terrible logic to it. But it was folk wisdom in a dying kingdom, and I will leave it as that. In the capital, the scholars of a place called the Soul Sanctum tried something. They believed the answer to the plague was hidden in soul, the pale force that animates every living thing, and they gathered it from old totems and then from living bugs, more and more of it, and their master said afterwards, "In my dreams I could see it, the kingdom's salvation, the cure, the answer was in the soul that animates our bodies." He was wrong, or he was too late, and the sanctum drowned in the very light it was trying to fight, and its master went the way of everyone else. Rest there, in the crossroads. The pale ferns are coming up through the old stone road, and the fossils are in the walls, and the plague is still, for now, only in the dreams. Nobody has done anything yet that cannot be undone. The Pale King had a little foresight. That was the whole of what he was, in the end. A creature that could see a short way ahead. And what he saw was that the light in the dreams could not be fought and could not be killed and could perhaps be contained, sealed, held. And what he needed to hold it was a thing that could not be reached by dreams at all. A being with no mind for the light to speak to, no will for it to break, no voice to cry out, an empty vessel. And there was, at the bottom of his kingdom, a sea of exactly that. I told you about the void, the dark at the bottom of the world that the ancient ones had worshipped and left. The king went down to it, and with the white lady, his root queen, he made children out of it. Soul of Wyrm, a memory in the deep says. Soul of root, heart of void. And the children hatched at the very bottom of the pit, in the dark, and they were small and pale-masked and silent, and they were tested, one by one, for a trace of anything, a flicker of mind, a hint of will. And any that had it were set aside, discarded, and the floor of the pit is covered in the shells of the ones set aside. I am going to say the next part gently because it is the hardest thing in the story, and you may be near sleep. Most of the children were left there. Some, the story thinks, climbed. One did, at least, and got out, though nobody, not even the people who made the game, can say how. That one is the small figure at the well in Dirtmouth. The one this story follows. A discarded child of the dark, come home. Hold that lightly. It is not a sad thing, quite. It is only where they came from. Everyone comes from somewhere. Theirs was the bottom of the world. One of the vessels was judged pure, empty enough, silent enough. And the king took that one out of the pit himself, and up, and sealed the door behind them with a lock only his own mark could open, and a tablet in the basin records the leaving. Our pure vessel has ascended. Beyond lies only the refuse and regret of its creation. We shall enter that place no longer. And he brought the child to his palace, the white palace, hidden in the bedrock, all pale gray stone, and tall windows, and white roots woven through the halls, and there he raised it. Trained it, grew it tall, and he named it the Hollow Night. There is a memory in the deep of what he said to it. No mind to think, he says, no will to break, no voice to cry suffering. Born of God and void, you shall seal the blinding light that plagues their dreams. You are the vessel, you are the Hollow Night. And the child stood in the white hall, and was still, and did as it was told, for years, and grew, and learned the nail, and became, in time, tall and terrible, and so far as anyone could see, perfectly empty. That was the plan. Raise an emptiness, and pour the goddess into it, and close the lid. And here is what nobody saw, or nobody wanted to. It was raised by someone. A child in a palace with a father who came to its lessons and stood over it and named it. And something got in. Not thought, exactly. Not will. The White Lady, years later, has one line about it, and it is the saddest sentence in the kingdom. Its supposed strength was ill-judged, she says. It was tarnished by an idea instilled. She does not say what idea. Most people who have thought about it think it was love. That the empty child loved the king who raised it, a little, and that a little was too much. The story never says so in those words. It only leaves the sentence there in the garden for you to sit with. Sit with it, then let it go. Nothing has gone wrong yet. Not quite. a vessel could hold the light, but a vessel could not lock the door behind itself. For that the king needed 3 others, 3 who would sleep, and by sleeping hold the seal shut from the outside for as long as the sleep lasted, which was to be forever. He called them dreamers, and 3 agreed. A tablet in the graveyard grounds remembers them. To protect the vessel, the dreamers lay sleeping. Through their devotion, Hallownest lasts eternal. The first was Manamon the teacher, the kingdom's chief scholar, who kept every piece of knowledge Hallownest had in an archive in the fog canyon, in glass, in the mist, and who wrote the elegy that plays over the beginning of the game. In wilds beyond they speak your name with reverence and regret, it goes. For none could tame our savage souls, yet you the challenge met. Under palest watch, you taught, we changed, base instincts were redeemed. A world you gave to bug and beast as they had never dreamed. She loved the king's kingdom, and she agreed to sleep for it, and she alone of the 3 did not believe the sleep should last forever. A world forever unchanging, she says, from inside her dream. The seals must break. She had a student named Quirrel, and she gave him her mask to carry, and sent him away, and he would come back. The second was Lurien the Watcher, in his spire above the capital, with his telescope, who wrote in his journal on the last day, "Sleep beckons eternal, and these words become my last. Though my gaze shall no longer fall upon this city, I will act forever in its protection. For king, for bug, for Hallownest, I head now to my rest." He meant it. He believed the seals should hold forever. Bonds must remain, he says, in the dream, and does not change his mind. 2 dreamers, then, who disagree about the very thing they are dreaming for and hold it shut anyway. That is the kind of loyalty this kingdom ran on. Rest with them a moment, the teacher and the watcher, asleep in their 2 towers, one at the top of the city and one in the fog, dreaming opposite dreams about the same locked door. The 3rd dreamer was not the king's to command. Herrah the beast, queen of Deepnest, who had refused his tram and his rule and his light, and who ruled the spiders and the weavers alone after her mate died. And when the king came down into her dark to ask her to sleep for his kingdom, she named her price, and it was not gold, and it was not land. She wanted a child of his, and he agreed, and the child was Hornet. The white lady, who might have minded, did not. I never begrudged the Wyrm's dalliance as bargain, she says, years later, of it. She's a fierce foe, strong in mind and body, striking reflection of her mother, though the 2 were permitted little time together. That last part is the cost. Herrah went to her sleep a short while after Hornet was born, and mother and daughter had almost nothing. There is a memory of it, found much later in another kingdom, of Herrah's last words to a small red child in the dark. "A mother," she says, "before the mask, before I lay forever in duty." She did not want to be remembered as a queen or a guardian, only as that. So Hornet was raised elsewhere. In the White Palace, by the White Lady who cared for her and worried, the story says that the child would find her harsh. And at the Hive, by its queen who taught her to fight. And in Deepnest, in the webs among her mother's people, 3 queens and no mother in the room. And she grew up fierce and red and fast, with a needle and a thread, and she is the only person in this whole story who has a name and a family and a grief that is entirely her own, and she carries all 3 lightly and does not talk about them, and guards a ruined kingdom nobody asked her to guard. Sleep on Hornet as a small red child in the dark, with her mother's voice above her. It was little time. It was enough for her to remember. That is what the memory is for. And so it was done. The hollow knight, grown tall, was taken to a temple built for the purpose, a black egg of a place in the crossroads, and chained inside it with the goddess of light poured into it and held. And the 3 dreamers went to their sleep in 3 far corners of the kingdom, the teacher in her fog, the watcher in his spire, the beast in her web, and their sleep locked the temple door from the outside. And in the middle of the capital, in the square, under the rain that had not yet begun, they built a fountain with a knight on it and an inscription. Memorial to the Hollow Knight, it says, in the black vault far above. Through its sacrifice, Hallownest lasts eternal. Eternal. That word again. The king had promised it at the founding, and he was promising it now, and the city went back to its business, and the pilgrims came, and the plague, for a while, receded, and the dream stopped, and it seemed to have worked. It seemed for a while to have worked. I want you to have that. There was a season, maybe more than one, when the kingdom believed it was saved, and the fountain was new, and the rain had not started, and the child in the black egg held. And the small ones in the pit, the discarded, the shells on the floor of the abyss, and the few who were still moving down there in the dark were, as the tablet said, entered no more. Forgotten on purpose by a king who had a lot to forget. That is the ceiling. 3 sleepers, 1 child in chains, 1 fountain, 1 door. Rest there at the fountain in the dry square. It is the last calm the city gets. It is a real calm. Take it. A place chapter, because you have earned one, and the kingdom has many. Greenpath is west of the crossroads, and it is the first green thing you find under the ground, and it is startling. Lush caverns, thick with leaf and vine, and broad pools of pale burning acid, and moss on everything, and the bugs who live there have grown moss on themselves to match, so that a stone will get up and walk. It was theirs before the king. The moss people and their goddess, a great slow mind called who dreamed of leaf, a tablet says, and cast these caverns so. In every bush and every vine, the mind of reveals itself. The king's roads went through it anyway. And the moss people let them, mostly, on the understanding that anyone who left the king's road answered to the law of instead, which is a very old kind of arrangement, and I rather like it. Stay on the path, and you are the king's. Step off it into the green, and you belong to something older and slower and less interested in you. It is a soft place, Greenpath, even now, even with the sickness in some of its creatures. The acid glows. The vines drip. Somewhere in it there is a lake, and beside the lake a small green shrine, and if you sit there long enough, the great slow mind of the place will notice you, and consider you, and decide you are all right. Rest there. By the acid lake, in the green. You are off the king's road. Nothing here is in a hurry to be anything. In a cave off Greenpath, in the dark, with eyes that catch the light, there is a hunter. Old and huge and not unkind, and he gives the knight a journal, and the journal is one of the great documents of the kingdom, because it is the hunter's own account of every creature in it, written in the voice of someone who has killed and eaten most of them, and thought about it afterwards. He is the one who describes the crystals singing. He is the one who says of the pit that the air grows stiller and a sense of emptiness pervades. He notices things. Hunters do. And he is honest about the sickness in a way the kingdom's own records are not. First they fell into deep slumber, he writes, of the bugs of Hallownest. Then they awoke with broken minds, and then their bodies started to deform. He does not dress it up. He also does not stop hunting them, and I mention that not to make you think less of him, but because it is what he is, and he knows it, and there is a peace in a creature that knows what it is. Fill his journal, kill one of everything, and note it down, and he gives you a mark and tells you that you are a hunter too, now, and means it as the highest thing he can say. Do not fill it tonight. Just sit in the cave with him, in the green dark, and let him talk about the things he has seen. He has been in the kingdom longer than almost anyone. He watched it fall, and he watched it sleep, and he is watching now a small pale thing walk through it, and he is, in his way, curious about how it will end. So am I. But not tonight. Tonight the hunter is telling stories in a cave, and none of them are about you. below the green is the fungus. Humid, noxious, choked with mushrooms of every kind, caustic pools underfoot, and a smell the story is quite frank about. And through it, once, ran the Pilgrim's Way, the old road to the capital, so that anyone going down to the city passed the Mushroom Clan and their peaceful, drifting, half-plant lives, and further on, the Mantis Village. The Mantis Village is one of the story's real places. 3 lords, sisters, on 3 thrones, in a hall at the bottom of the fungal groves, and their warriors on the walls, and everything about them says, "We were here first, and we do not need you." They keep their treaty. They keep the border. And when the small one from the well comes down into their hall, they will not let it pass until it has fought them, all 3, at once, and if it wins, they bow. That is the whole test. Not whether you are strong, whether you can be trusted at their border. Win, and the whole village stops treating you as an intruder and starts treating you as a guest. Their claws come down. You can walk anywhere. There was a 4th lord once, a brother, and when the sickness came and the mantises resisted it, he did not. He embraced it, and it made him strong and orange and mad, and his sisters cast him out, and he went to the queen's overgrown garden with his followers, and calls himself a lord still, and rules the thorns. Which is the sad half of the Mantis story. But the 3 sisters are still on their thrones, and the border still holds, and I would rather leave you with that. 3 lords, spears grounded, in a quiet hall, having kept their word to a king they never liked, for longer than the king kept his to anyone. It started at some point after the sealing. Nobody records the day. Above the capital there was a lake, a wide blue one, in the graveyard grounds, and the cavern roof under it cracked, and the water came through, and it did not stop. It rains in the City of Tears. Always. Indoors, under the ground, on the towers and the bridges, and the fountain with the night on it, and the runoff finds its way down through the streets and out into the deep, and the sound of it is the sound of the city now, and it is, of everything in this kingdom, the thing I would most like you to hear. Quirrel says it best, standing at a window with the rain in front of him. The city looks to be built into an enormous cavern, he says, and the rain pours down from cracks in the stone above. There must be a lot of water up there somewhere. He says it wonderingly. He has been traveling a long time, and he still finds things wonderful, and that is Quirrel, and it is why he is the story's most beloved wanderer. There is a bench by that window. He sits on it. You can sit on it. It is one of the few places in the kingdom that is dry. And the city, under the rain, is not entirely dead. There is a relic seeker in a shop, grumbling. There is a knight in a bathhouse, retired. There is music sometimes from a hot spring, but mostly there is the rain on the wide windows and the lamps and the empty bridges between the tall towers and the great sealed gates the city closed to keep the plague out, in vain, and the fountain, still standing, saying eternal, into the rain. That is the sound of this whole story, if it has one. Rain on a city under the ground, at night on a fountain nobody reads. Rest in it. It is the softest place in the kingdom. It has been raining for a very long time, and it will be raining when you wake. I have said the word bench a great many times tonight, and I want to tell you why. In Hallownest, wherever the kingdom's people once stopped, there is a bench. Iron, or stone, or carved from a shell, with a lamp beside it, in stations and squares, and at the edges of the wild places, and when the knight sits on one, everything resets. Its shell mends. Its map fills in. Its place in the world is fixed, so that if anything goes wrong, it comes back to that bench, and not to the well. The benches are the story's kindness to the player, and the kingdom's kindness to the traveler, and there is one in every region, and some in strange places, and finding one is the best feeling in the game. And there are hot springs. pools of warm pale water in the crossroads and the city and the nest, where the night can stand and be slowly filled with soul, and the water glows, and there is a soft sound to it, and in the city a bug playing an instrument beside the pool who will not stop and does not need to. People who play the game go and stand in the hot springs for no reason. It heals nothing they need healed. They go because the sound is nice and the light is soft, and the small silent thing looks, for once, entirely at rest. So that is your instruction for the rest of tonight, if you need one. Find the bench. Sit on it. There is a lamp beside it, and it will not go out. Or stand in the spring, in the warm water, with the music going, and let the light fill you back up. Every one of these kingdoms has that in it somewhere. A place built into the world for the sole purpose of stopping. Someone put it there on purpose. Use it. East and up from the crossroads is the mountain, Crystal Peak, and it is a mine. Its crystals grow pink and pale and glowing, and each one, the hunter's journal says, holds a bright point of searing heat inside, a lower cousin of the soul that runs through everything, and the king's kingdom dug it out by the cartload and ran it down conveyor belts through the mountain's tunnels, and the belts, some of them, are still rattling. Nobody has switched them off. There is no one to. The miners are still there too. That is the eerie part, and I will pass over it quickly. The sickness took them, and it left them, strangely, still mining, husks with picks, working a seam that has not mattered for 100 years. But here's the part I keep. They sing too, the hunter says of the crystals, if you listen. Very softly. And it is true. In the game, if you stand still in the deep of the mountain, under the pink light, there is a high, faint ringing, always, just under hearing, that is the crystals themselves. The mountain hums. And at the very top, above the mine and the belts and the husks, in the wind, is the crown and the forgotten statue of the goddess with the sun for a face, and one small bug, later, will climb all the way up there and stand in front of it and remember her, and that is where the end of the story starts. Not yet. For now, stay in the mountain, halfway up, in the pink dark, with the belts rattling somewhere and the crystals singing under everything. It is one of the most peaceful sounds a mine has ever made. Let it hum you down. There is a substance that runs through everything in this kingdom, and it is worth a chapter because it is the closest the story has to a soul in the plain sense. It is called, in fact, soul. A pale white force, the life force that animates a living body, and when a creature is struck, it gives some up in little white particles, and the night can gather it, and hold it, and spend it, to heal, or to strike harder. That is the whole of the game's magic, and it is not really magic. It is life, moved from one place to another. The scholars of the Soul Sanctum in the city believe the cure for the plague was hidden in it, and hoarded it from old totems, and then from the living, more and more, and drowned in it, and their master floated in his tower, full of the stuff, and went mad with it, and, in the end, gave it all back, because that is what happens to soul in the end. It returns. You cannot keep it. You can only move it along. And in the mountain, in the crystals, there is a lesser cousin of it, the same light, harder and colder, locked in stone, singing. The whole kingdom, if you squint, is a study of that one pale force, in bodies, in crystal, in totems, in the hands of scholars who wanted to own it. The lesson, if there is one, is that it does not stay owned. Rest on the soul. It is in you, the story would say, and in the crystal, and in the rain, and it is only ever passing through. That is a restful thought, if you let it be one. Nothing is yours to keep. Everything is just moving along. The graveyard of the kingdom is in the east, above the city, and it is gray, colorless, until you carry a certain thing, and then it turns blue, and the air fills with soft drifting spirits who were there all along and could not be seen. The moths kept it once, their whole tribe. Passengers would come here, the old stag says, who carried them to conduct rituals for those who had passed on. Not anymore, though. Perhaps the dead conduct their own rituals now. One moth is left. The Seer, she is called, an old blind bug in a small dark room off the graveyard, waiting for someone she calls the Wielder, someone who can carry a nail made of dream and gather up the essence the dead leave behind. And when the small one from the well comes to her and gathers and brings it back, she gives them things, gifts, one after another, and she talks, and what she talks about, in the end, is her people, and their sin, that they were born of a light and forsook it, turned their backs to it, forgot it even. She has carried that alone for the whole of her tribe. And at the very last, when there is nothing more to give, she says the thing she has been holding. Don't remember us, Wielder. Don't honor us. We do not deserve it. And then, softer, in pieces, I'm sorry. Light. Radiance. I remember you. And she comes apart into a drift of pale essence and rises and is gone, and the Moth Tribe ends there in a small dark room with an old blind bug remembering at the last possible moment the goddess her ancestors forgot. That is not a sad ending. It is a finished one. She was waiting to say it. She got to say it. Rest with the spirits in the blue grounds. They are not restless. They are only visible. West of the green, and once part of it, before the ground moved, is the canyon, and the canyon is full of fog. Thick, drifting, disorienting, and floating through it, great slow, gas-filled bubbles, some of which will burst if you touch them, and below it acid, and in it a hum of strange energy that makes the hunter warn you a person can lose their senses down there. Strange and unnatural things lurk. It is not, on the face of it, a restful place. But it has, at its heart, an archive. The teacher's archives? Monomons. Glass everywhere, tanks and tubes and jellyfish drifting inside them, and at the center of it, in the largest tank, the teacher herself, asleep in her seal, guarded by a vast, gentle jellyfish creature that does not know it is a guardian, only that this is where it lives. Within these chambers, the teacher sought to store the kingdom's knowledge, Quirrel says, standing in the mist, and at its core she stored herself. To save Hallownest, the teacher willingly became a seal. But upon herself she enacted an additional protection. The protection was Quirrel, her student. She gave him her mask to carry and sent him out of the kingdom, and he wandered for a very long time and forgot why he was carrying it, and came back anyway, drawn, and found himself standing in her archive, in the fog, remembering. He is the one who lets the small one reach her. He is very kind about it. And after, having done the thing he was sent to do, he goes and sits by the blue lake above the graveyard on the shore and looks at the water and says he has seen enough of the world and it was beautiful, and the story leaves him there and does not say more, and neither will I. Rest with Quirrel by the lake? He is content. He was a good student. He came back. Below everything in the west is the nest. Web-choked, twisting, maze-like tunnels, lit here and there by dim mushrooms, and, in long stretches, not lit at all, so that even in the game you cannot see the walls without a lantern. Things bite in the dark. Things scratch. Cloth, a big soft warrior who came down there to prove herself, says of it, this whole area swarms with deadly critters, biting, burning, scratching types. I'd thought to test my strength against them. Now that bravado has left me, and all I feel is tired and sore. That is Deepnest. It makes the brave tired. It is Herrah's country. The spiders and the weavers, under their sleeping queen, in the great web at the center where she lies dreaming, and it refused the king entirely, and it still does. His abandoned tram sits in the rock at its edge, unfinished, exactly where the workers dropped their tools and ran. There is a village down there, hidden, and a hot spring, and beehives beyond it, and Hornet's own beginnings, and, in the deepest room, the queen in her seal, spun round with silk, dreaming her one dream, which was of a daughter. I said the dark in this story is not evil, only what is left. Deepnest is where you learn that. It is frightening. It is also home to a great many things, and to a small red child once, and there is a place near the queen's chamber where the webs are thick and warm, and the light is dim red, and it is, if you stop fighting it, restful. Everything that lives down here is asleep at this hour, or should be. Let them sleep. Let the queen dream of her daughter. She has been dreaming a long time, and the daughter grew up fine. Far off, past the ash in gold, there is a hive. Bees, in a honeycomb city of their own, ruled by a queen called Vespa, and they had chosen, at the founding of Hallownest, like Deepnest, to remain their own. Not part of the kingdom. Not against it. Beside it. The hive is warm, and amber, and busy, and it did not fall the way the rest fell, and when the night reaches it, the bees are still going about their work, defensive but not sick, and there is honey, and there is a queen, sleeping now, huge and gold, in the deepest comb. Hornet learned to fight there. That is a thing the second game confirms that the first only hinted at. The child of Herrah, raised in the White Palace by the White Lady, was sent to the hive to be taught, and Vespa taught her, hard, with the needle and the thread, and Hornet remembers it in red, later, in the memory she is given, and it is not a soft memory, but it is a proud one. 3 queens, I keep saying. Herrah gave her the blood. The White Lady gave her the house. Vespa gave her the needle. And out of the 3 came the fastest, fairest, least sentimental creature in either kingdom, who is nonetheless, when it counts, kind. Picture the hive at the hour when everything in it is asleep except the guards on the outer comb. Gold and warm and humming very softly the way a hive hums, and the great queen at the bottom of it in her honeyed sleep, and in a training comb, long empty now, the mark of a small red child's needle in the wax. It is a good place. It kept itself. Some things in this story did. Rest in the amber. It is warm in there. It always was. There is a thread that runs from the bottom of one kingdom to the top of the other, and it is silk. Long ago, before Hallownest, a tribe of weavers came to Deepnest from somewhere far away and lived under Herrah's rule beside the spiders, and wove, and their weaving is everywhere in the nest and in the story. The weaver's den, deep in the dark, where the last of them left their song, the silk that seals the beast in her sleep, the needle and thread that Hornet, half theirs, carries, and that somewhere far away was Pharloom. In Pharloom the weavers had been made. Grandmother Silk had taken the native creatures of that kingdom and, with her silk, evolved them and called them daughters, and told them they were divine, and some of them believed her, and some, in the end, did not, and it was the ones who did not who turned on her and sealed her and built a citadel over her, and it was, presumably, others of them who left long before and went down into the world and found a dark nest under a distant kingdom and a spider queen who would have them. That is how the 2 stories join. Not with a war or a prophecy, with a tribe of weavers moving house. And it is why they came for Hornet. Claim the weaver in half part. Last of their line. She is the last of the ones who left, on her mother's side, and the last of a Wyrm on her father's, and both kingdoms wanted her for 1/2 of what she is, and neither of them got her. She got herself. Rest on the weavers, in the den, at the bottom of Deepnest, at their looms, in the dark, long ago, weaving the silk that would one day hold a queen asleep and one day tie 2 kingdoms together. They did not know. Weavers never do. They only weave. Now the turn in the middle of the story, and it is a quiet one. The seal held. For a while, And then it did not, quite. Because the vessel in the black egg was not, after all, entirely empty. Something had got in the White Palace, in the years of raising, and the White Lady's sentence is all we have. Its supposed strength was ill-judged. It was tarnished by an idea instilled. Whatever the idea was, and most think it was the simplest one, an attachment, a child's regard for the one who raised it, it was enough of a self for the light to speak to. And the light spoke. Slowly, the goddess in the egg found a foothold in the child that held her, and pushed, and the plague, which had receded, came back. Into the dreams first, then the eyes, then the streets, and the king, who had a little foresight, and had used all of it, did the thing the story never forgives him for. He left. The official manual says it flatly. As Hallownest fell to ruin, its reclusive king abandoned his subjects and went into hiding. And his palace went with him. The whole White Palace, out of the bedrock, gone, and no sign of a fight. It's as though the whole place just vanished, the relic seeker says, still puzzled by it. It did. Into a dream, with the king inside it. So that is the reversal, and it is a small one, and it undoes everything. The pure vessel was not pure because it had been loved. The eternal kingdom was not eternal because its king could see just far enough ahead to know how to leave. And the fountain in the square went on saying eternal in the rain to no one. Rest here at the middle. It is a heavy place, but the ground is level. The worst is over the next hill, and I will walk you through it slowly and out the other side, and the other side is Dirtmouth and an old bug by a well. When the light broke free of the child in the egg, or nearly, it did what it had not been able to do the first time. It got into the dead. Across the kingdom the husks of the fallen got up, orange-eyed, and walked, and the roads filled with them, and the busiest highways in Hallownest, the crossroads that had pulsed with life, the old Stag says, became what they are when you first come down the well. Quiet and wrong and full of things that used to be citizens. The city sealed its gates. The great gates have been sealed, the tablet says. None shall enter. None shall leave. It did not help. The plague was already inside, in the dreams, in the sanctum, in the Watcher's own tower. And Hallownest emptied. Most of its people died, or became the orange-eyed, and a few, the Mantises, the hermit at the edge, some scattered others, kept their minds and stayed out of the way. And in the black egg, under the strain of it, the hollow night's shell began to crack. I want to be careful here, because it is the darkest hour of the story, and I promised you I would tell it once and plainly, and then move on. A kingdom that had been given its mind by a pale god lost it again, most of it, to a goddess it had forgotten. That is the whole shape. The king was gone. The queen was bound in her garden. The dreamers slept. The child in the egg held, cracked, holding. And it stayed that way for a very long time. Long enough for the rain to wear grooves in the bridges. Long enough for the town on the surface to empty down the well. Long enough for a discarded child, somewhere far away, to forget where it had come from, and to hear, one day, a call, and to start walking back. And so, for the long middle of its history, Hallownest simply slept. This is a landscape chapter, and there is no plot in it at all. Out past Dirtmouth, on the western cliffs, the wind howls over stone, and there is a lonely lamplit path, and a shrine to a nail-master, and nothing else. In the crossroads, the ferns come up through the road. In Greenpath, the acid glows, and the moss people go about their slow business, under the eye of Un. In the fungal wastes, the mushrooms drift, and the mantises keep their watch. In the city it rains. In the mountain the belts rattle, and the crystals sing. At the edge of the kingdom, the ash falls on the grave of the Wyrm, and an old creature the size of a hill lies there, and does not much mind. In the fog the jellyfish drift through the archive. In the nest the webs are still. In the gardens, the thorns grow over the queen's greenhouses, and the traitor lord counts his followers. In the basin, the roots reach across the bare rock toward a palace that is not there. And at the bottom of it all, in the pit, the sea of dark moves a little, and the shells of the children lie where they were left, and a lighthouse stands on the far shore, unlit. That is the kingdom, asleep. It is not dead. That is the thing to hold. Nothing in it is dead, exactly, only waiting, the way a house waits, with the furniture under sheets. And it is beautiful. I keep saying that, and I keep meaning it. A whole world under the ground, in soft light, with rain in it, and singing crystals, and moss that walks, and it is all just sitting there, being beautiful for nobody. Rest in it. You are the nobody it has been being beautiful for. Take your time. And then, one day, a small figure came over the western cliffs, out of the wilds, in the wind, with a nail on its back, and a pale horned mask, and no name, and no voice, and walked down into Dirtmouth, and stood at the well. The story only ever calls it the night. Its makers only ever called it that. It is one of the discarded children of the pit that got out, somehow, and wandered beyond the kingdom for a long time and forgot nearly everything and came back, drawn by something. The dreamers, in their sleep, wonder about it. What compels its climb out of the darkness? What compels its return to this sacred kingdom? A call from beyond the seals? By the vessel or by that captive light? Nobody knows. The story does not know. The people who wrote it have said so. It came back. That is all. Elderbug is at the well. He tells it about the town and the kingdom below and worries, and it looks down the well and goes over the edge, and that is the beginning of the game and of the last third of this story, which is not the story of a kingdom anymore, but of one small, silent thing walking through it all the way down and meeting everyone who is left. It lands in the crossroads, the ferns and the fossils and the old highway. It finds the temple of the black egg almost at once and cannot open it and does not know yet what is inside. And it goes on because there is nowhere else to go but on. I want you to see it small and pale in the big dark walking. It does not hurry. It does not speak. It looks at things. It sits on benches. It is, in its silence, the most restful protagonist a story ever had, and I am going to follow it slowly, and you can follow it into sleep, and it will not mind. It never minds. It only walks. As the night goes down, the town above it, strangely, fills back up. Not with the ones who left. With new ones, met below and sent up. A tiny bug called Sly, found asleep and dreaming in a room in the crossroads, who turns out to be a shopkeeper and sets up a shop and turns out later to be a great deal more than a shopkeeper. A map maker called Cornifer, humming to himself in every new region before you can see him, and his wife Iselda, who runs the map shop in town and misses him and sells you pins. Bretta, a shy bug rescued from the fungal wastes, who goes home to Dirtmouth and writes in her diary about her rescuer in terms that get less accurate and more romantic every entry. And Zote. Zote the Mighty, as he calls himself, a gray bug with a wooden nail he calls Life Ender, and a list of 57 precepts for living, which he will recite to you at length, and who is rescued by the night from a beast's jaws in the green, and thanks nobody, and goes on to be rescued again, and to lecture each time about how he did not need it. Bretta falls in love with him. Of course she does. There is a whole small subplot about it that ends with Zote sitting on a bench in Dirtmouth being magnificently ungrateful and Bretta gazing at him, and it is the funniest thing in a kingdom that does not have many funny things, and it is gentle about it. That is Dirtmouth later. A shop with a bell. A map shop with a lamp on. Bretta's house. Zote on his bench. Elderbug by the well, delighted and a little overwhelmed by all the company. Cornifer humming somewhere far below. It is a small town coming back to life, one rescued bug at a time, and the knight who cannot speak is the reason and never says so and never could. Rest in the town at night. The lamps are on. There are more windows lit than there were. Someone is humming. She finds the knight in Greenpath first and does not introduce herself. She drops from above, red, fast, with a needle on a thread, and fights, and it is a real fight, and when it is over, she looks at the small pale thing that has beaten her, and does not kill it, and does not explain, and goes. She is the guardian of the ruins now, chasing off intruders, watching over the black egg and the sealed door to the pit for reasons that are hers. And she has decided, in the green, that this intruder is worth watching. She finds it again, later, at the edge of the kingdom, in the falling ash, at the grave of the Wyrm, and fights it again, harder, and when it wins again, she stops, and this time she speaks. She calls it a sibling. Not warmly, accurately. She asks it a question that is the whole hinge of the story's ending. Would you supplant our birth-cursed sibling, she says, meaning the one in the egg, or would you transcend it, take its place? Or end the thing that makes a place necessary? She does not tell it which. She only tells it that the choice exists, and that there is a mark deep in the pit that it will need if it means to choose the second thing. And she leaves it to decide. That is Hornet. Half worm, half beast, raised by 3 queens and no mother, guardian of a kingdom that is not hers, and the only one in it who will tell the knight the truth and then get out of the way. She is not gentle. She is fair. Sleep on her, standing in the ash at the kingdom's edge, needle-grounded, watching a small pale sibling walk away toward the pit, having said the one thing that needed saying and not one word more. In the graveyard grounds, from a moth in a dream, the knight is given a nail that is not a nail. It is made of dream. It cuts nothing. It opens. Swing it at a sleeping thing and you hear what it dreams. Swing it at a spirit and it comes apart into essence and rests. And swing it, at last, at a dreamer, one of the 3, and their seal breaks. That is the key the whole story has been waiting for since the black egg was closed. A way to wake the sleepers, one by one, from the outside. The knight goes to them in turn. To the fog and the teacher with Quirrel's help. To the spire and the watcher up the long stair through the rain. To the nest and the beast in her web past a spider the size of a house. And each of them, as the seal breaks, is heard for a moment. Monomon glad of it, the seals must break. Lurian holding to his post, bonds must remain. Herrah silent mostly. And each time, the door of the black egg loosens a little, and the light inside pushes a little harder, and the plague in the kingdom flares. The dreamers wonder about it, all 3, in the same voice, as it happens. Would the seals break? They cannot be undone. But the vessel weakens. That plague springs anew. They must be undone. Yet still our seals remain. Our duty holds. And then they do not. And the way to the egg is open. Rest there, at the memorial, in the blue grounds, with the 3 masks on their plinth, and the door somewhere far away, swinging slowly open. It is not a threatening sound. It is the sound of a very long night starting to end. I want to go back to the 3 sleepers, once more, gently, because they are the quiet heart of the whole thing, and they deserve a chapter that is only about the sleeping. Monomon, in her fog, in her glass, among the drifting jellyfish, dreaming of a world that should be allowed to change. Lurian, in his spire, above the rain, dreaming of a city he can no longer see, but still, he believes, protects. Herrah, in her web, in the deepest dark, dreaming, the whole time, of a daughter she had for a moment. They did not have to. That is the thing. Each of them was asked, and each of them could have said no, and each of them lay down instead, for a kingdom, for a king, for a locked door far away, and slept, for longer than any of them can have imagined, holding it shut with nothing but the fact of their sleeping. Lurien's last written words are the ones I keep. Sleep beckons eternal, and these words become my last. Though my gaze shall no longer fall upon this city, I will act forever in its protection. He was a watcher. He gave up watching forever so that there would be something left to watch. And when the night comes to wake them at the very end, so that the door can open, there is a mercy in it that the story does not spell out. Their duty is over. They have held it long enough. Monomon, who wanted exactly that, gets her wish, and Lurien, who did not, is released anyway from a post he would have kept forever. They can stop now. All three. Rest with the sleepers, in their 3 far rooms, at the moment just before waking, when the long duty is nearly done and the dream is still soft around them. They earned the sleep. They are about to be let out of it. Both of those are kind. Inside the temple is the child, tall now and terrible and cracked in chains, with the light burning behind its mask, and it fights the way a thing fights that has been holding a door shut for 100 years with its whole body and does not want to and cannot stop. And what happens next depends on what the night brought with it. That is how the game tells it, and I will tell it that way too, side by side, without choosing, because the story itself says all of them are true. If the night comes with nothing but its nail, it wins and takes the child's place, and the door closes on it, and it holds, and the plague recedes, and the fountain in the rain gets a new name it will never carry. That is one ending. If it comes with the mark from the pit, the heart of the dark, and Hornet is there, she breaks the child's shell open with her needle, and the night goes in through the crack, into the dream, to the goddess herself. And if it is too slow, Hornet is caught in the seal with it, and both of them stay, siblings together, in the dark of the egg. That is another. And if it is not too slow, it stands in the goddess's own dream, on a platform, in a golden nowhere, in front of the light with the sun for a face, and does not seal her. It ends her. There is a 5th way, later, in a dream of gods, where the small one lets go of its own shape and becomes the dark itself, all of it, the whole sea from the bottom of the world, in one shape, and reaches up out of the golden dream and takes the light down. But the story says all of these are true, and I believe it, and I am not going to pick for you tonight. I am only going to say that in every one of them, the small silent thing from the well walked all the way down and did the thing in front of it, and that in most of them, the rain in the city afterwards is only rain. Rest on that. Only rain. Whichever door. Now the falling part of the story, where the pressure comes off and the kingdom is full of small people. In Dirtmouth, if the night lights a certain lantern found in the Howling Cliffs, a circus arrives. Red tents in the night, and lanterns, and a tall, thin ringmaster in scarlet, with a face like a mask, and a voice like velvet, and his name is Grimm, and his troupe travels between worlds through dream, and comes to dying kingdoms to gather what they leave behind. Through dream I travel, at lantern's call, he says, to consume the flames of a kingdom's fall. He is not a villain. That is what I like about him. He is a scavenger of endings, and courteous about it, and he gives the night a small flame child to raise, and sends it out to gather the last embers of the kingdom, and it grows, and there is a dance in the tent at the end that is one of the most beautiful things in the game, the ringmaster and the small pale intruder whirling in the red light. And then the troupe folds its tents and is gone to some other world's fall, and the town is a little quieter, and there is a small red bat thing following the night around that was not there before. Picture the tents in Dirtmouth at night, the lanterns, the music faint, Elderbug not at all sure about any of it, and a ringmaster on the steps bowing very slightly to a small silent visitor as one professional to another. He has seen a great many kingdoms end. He is not sad about it. Endings are what he is for. Sleep on the red tents. They will not be there in the morning, and that is the point of them. In a pit of junk, in the waste below the city, sealed in a chain cocoon like a sarcophagus, the night finds a bug who speaks in the plural. We, she says. Us. She is the Godseeker, and she is many, a whole tribe carried in one mind, behind one mask, from a distant place called the Land of Storms, whose gods died or left, and she came to Hallownest, drawn by the afterglow of a god who was no longer there. Even long departed, she says, we feel the afterglow of the god power that sat this throne. That lingering power alone was beacon enough to draw us here. Nobody says who chained her. The people who made the game have said, on purpose, that they never will. She is simply there, in the junk, seeking, and what she seeks is a god of gods, a being worthy of a whole realm of worship she carries inside her, a dream place called Godhome, and she thinks at first that it might be the light. She is wrong about that. What she finds, in the end, is the small dark thing that came to let her out. Godhome is a strange, gold, empty place where the night fights everyone it has ever fought, again, in order, all the way up to the goddess, and it is where the fifth ending lives, the one where the small one becomes the whole sea. I mention it only for the Godseeker's sake, because she is the loneliest bug in the story, a chorus with no one to sing to, and in one ending, if the night has been kind and brought her a flower, she is spared what comes. She was looking for a god. She got a visitor with a flower. It is the better outcome. Rest with her in the junk before the cocoon opens. She is not afraid. She has been waiting for company, and company is coming. One last small errand, because it is my favorite in the game, and I have mentioned the flower twice without explaining it. In the graveyard grounds, in a room off to the side, there is a gray bug in mourning who cannot leave her room and who asks the knight to carry a flower for her. A single white flower, very small, very pale, to a grave in the queen's overgrown garden, far away on the other side of the kingdom, and she warns you. It is delicate. If you are struck even once, it breaks. If you ride the stag, it breaks. You have to walk it. All the way, without being touched. So you walk it, through the crossroads and the green and the fungal caverns and the gardens, past every creature in the kingdom that would like to hit you, carrying nothing but a flower, and it is, in a game full of hard things, the hardest gentle thing anyone has ever asked of a player, and when you set it down on the grave, a small one, in the thorns, the gray bug in her room is, for the first time, at rest. That is the errand. That is the whole of it. And it is the same flower that Hornet is handed in a memory by a queen who was not her mother, and the same one the Godseeker can be given, and it is, if you are wondering what the story thinks the opposite of the plague is, that. Not the light. A flower carried carefully, without being struck, all the way across a dark kingdom to someone who needs it. Rest on the flower. It is very small. It is being carried right now by someone very carefully through the green, and they will not be hit, and it will not break, and it will get there. It always gets there in the end. That is what the flower is for. A soft chapter for the ones nobody puts in the histories. Myla, a young miner in the Crystal Mountain, who sings while she digs, a little song about the crystals and the light, and who is glad of a visitor, and who, the next time you come by, is not singing anymore, and the time after that is not Myla anymore. I will not dwell on it. I will tell you that the song is real, and it is lovely, and every person who has played the game remembers it, and that is a kind of staying. Cloth, the big soft warrior with the club, who wanted to be brave, and was frightened in Deepnest, and admits it, and finds her courage later, in the Queen's garden, in the last fight, and it costs her, and she is happy about it, in the way of people who have finally done the thing they were afraid of. Tiso, a fighter with a shield who talks a very good fight and heads for the arena and does not, it turns out, come out of it and is remembered by nobody but the player who finds him. The nailsmith, alone in his forge below the city, who has spent his life making one perfect blade, and, when he finally makes it, asks the knight to end him with it, and can be refused, and, if refused, wanders up to a bathhouse in the city and takes up sculpture with a retired knight and is happier than he has ever been. That one you may choose. I recommend the bathhouse. And the Dung Defender. One of the king's 5 great knights, in the sewers under the city, in a suit of armor, fighting with balls of dung, whooping with joy at the sight of a worthy opponent, remembering the old days when the 5 of them stood beneath the throne, worried, still, after all these years, about a formless enemy he could not hit. He is the happiest creature in Hallownest, and he lives in a sewer, and he loved his king, and he does not know the king left. Nobody has told him. I would not either. Let him whoop. Let him remember the 5 of them. Somebody in this kingdom should be that glad. At the far edge, past the ash, in the rock, there is an arena, the Colosseum of Fools, full of bugs who came from everywhere to fight and be watched, with a lord on a throne above who has, the story implies, been up there a very long time and does not come down. Trials, wagers, a crowd that never stops. It is the loudest place in the kingdom, and I only bring you here to point out that it exists, that even in a dead kingdom there is somewhere that people go to shout and to leave it. Tiso went there. Zote, unbelievably, went there and survived because his opponents could not take him seriously enough to try. And on the other side of the world, in the west, over Dirtmouth, are the cliffs, where the wind howls, and where the night first came in. There is a nail master up there, an old bug, who teaches one art, and one only, and there is a shrine, and there is nothing else, and it is the emptiest, cleanest place in the game, just wind and stone, and a lamp. Between those two, the loud arena at one edge and the silent cliff at the other, is the whole kingdom, and everyone in it is somewhere on that line between shouting and wind. Tonight be at the cliff end. Sit by the lamp with the old nail master who has taught what he had to teach and is content and let the wind go over. There is no one to fight up here. There is nothing to prove. The town is just below with its lamps. The whole kingdom is under your feet, asleep. That is a good place to be at this hour. It is where the night rested too before it went down. Rest with it. Below the basin, behind the door, only the king's mark opens, is the pit. Far down below us, beneath the kingdom, the hunter writes, the air grows stiller, and a sense of emptiness pervades. Can life flourish down there? It is a chasm. Its floor is the shells. And past the shells is the sea, the dark sea, moving a little, and on the far shore, a lighthouse, and if the night climbs to it and lights it, the sea goes calm, and the shades that rise from it lie back down. The knight goes back there, near the end, to the birthplace, and stands where it was hatched, and remembers, in a memory the game gives you, the king in his white light, choosing another, and walking away, and the door closing, and the dark. And in that place, if it has come with the right things, it takes the heart of the dark into itself, and stops being only a discarded child, and becomes something the king never intended. Not a vessel. The thing the vessels were made of, wearing a small horned mask. I know that sounds heavy. Here is why it is not. The dark in this story was never the enemy. The people who worshipped it before the kingdom were not mad. The sea at the bottom is not hungry. It is only what is left when the light is taken away, and it turns out, in the end, to be the one thing the light cannot touch, and the small one who was thrown away into it is the one who comes back up carrying it and sets everyone free. That is a story about being discarded, and it has a good ending, and I want you to have it plainly. The bottom of the world was not a grave. It was a place to come back from. Rest at the lighthouse. It is lit now. The sea is calm. There is a place that is not a place, reached through the Godseeker's dream, and it is called Godhome, and it is gold, and empty, and endless, and it is where the last and strangest part of the game lives. In Godhome, the night fights every creature it has ever fought, again, in order, in long chains, up and up, an ascending stair of every foe in the kingdom, ending at the light itself, at the goddess in her most complete and terrible form. It is the hardest thing in the game by a long way, and most players never finish it, and it is optional, and it contains the truest ending. Because at the top of Godhome, if the small one has taken the whole sea of dark into itself, it does the thing the Pale King never dared and never could. It does not seal the light. It does not merely defeat her. It lets go of its own shape entirely, becomes the void, all of it, the whole sea from the bottom of the world, risen up into one form, and reaches into the goddess's own dream, and takes her down into the dark, and ends her and the plague everywhere, forever. The discarded child, made of the thing the king threw away, is the one that finishes what the king began and abandoned. It costs the small one everything. It does not come back from that, not as itself. It becomes the dark, and the dark lies back down, calm, at the bottom of the world, and the kingdom above is quiet and clean and free. That is the ending the second game seems to follow from, the one where the light is truly gone and only the dark remains, resting. I told you the dark was not the enemy. In the truest ending, the dark is the hero, and its reward is to become the thing it always was, at peace, at the bottom, where a nameless people once knelt and worshipped it, long before any king. Rest on that. It is a strange comfort, and it is a real one. The dark won, and nothing bad came of it, and everyone slept better after. The White Palace is gone from the world, but it is still somewhere. Inside the dream of a dead knight's armor, in the basin, if you know how to look, there is a way in, and the palace is there, whole, pale gray and white, with the tall windows and the outside light and the roots woven through every hall, and it is full, wall to wall, of buzzsaws and thorns and spikes, so that walking through it is the hardest thing in the game, and there is a reason for that, and the reason is that the king's memory of his own house is a memory of everything that hurts. At the end of it, in the throne room, is the king, or what is left of him. Small, on his throne, still, and the knight takes from him the mark it needs, the king's own brand, to open the door to the pit, and he does not stir. He has, in his dream, in his palace, in his own memory, finally stopped. Whether that is death, or sleep, or, as the old creature at the edge said of the Wyrm, only more transformation, the story does not say. He is still. That is all. There is a room, off the main path, that is very hard to reach, and in it there is nothing but a small white bench, and beyond the bench a memory of the king and a small vessel and a hallway, and the phrase, "No cost too great." That is the White Palace. A hard, beautiful place full of things that cut, and a still king, and one quiet room with a bench where you can sit if you can get there. Get there. Sit. The saws are somewhere else. The king is asleep. So is the palace. So, nearly, are you? So here it is, all of it, in the order it happened, which is not the order anyone finds it in. A people who worshipped the dark and left. A worm that came to a canyon to die and became small and pale and bright instead, and woke the minds of the bugs and was loved for it, and built a kingdom and promised it would last forever. A root queen in a garden. Moths who forgot their goddess. Mantises who kept a treaty. A capital under a lake. Then a statue on a mountain, and a light coming back in dreams, and a plague that was only a whole people refusing to remember. A king who went to the bottom of the world and made empty children out of the dark to hold the light, and chose one, and raised it, and loved it a little too much for it to be empty. 3 sleepers. A fountain. A daughter bargained for. a seal that held and then did not, and a king who saw it coming and left, and a palace that vanished. Rain, a kingdom asleep for longer than anyone remembers. And then a small discarded thing at a well that came back without knowing why, and walked all the way down and rescued a mapmaker and a shopkeeper and a shy bug and a fool, and fought its sister twice, and woke the sleepers, and went into the egg and did the thing in front of it, whichever thing that was. That is the story so far. It is not finished. There is a red child in a cage in another kingdom entirely, and I will tell you about her softly, and then I will let you go. Sometime after the events in Hallownest, however they ended, Hornet was taken. Envoys from another kingdom, far away, came for her, and caught her, and put her in a cage bound with runes, and carried her off. A commandment found later says why. Full chamber to the kingdom of the white worm, it reads. Claim the weaver in half part. Last of their line. Sensed strong with silk. Resistance anticipated. Quell with rune cage. She was wanted for her mother's blood. Herrah's people, the weavers of Deepnest, had come long ago from that far kingdom, and it wanted the last of them back. The cage did not hold. Somewhere over the strange country, a great silk fly struck it, and it broke, and Hornet fell a long way into a kingdom she had never seen. That is where the second game begins. And the kingdom is called Pharloom, and it is not Hallownest, and it is not underground exactly so much as up. A kingdom you climb. Bone bottom at the bottom, and a long ascent through mosses and marrow and moss grottos, and a great deep well up to a citadel at the crest that nobody who climbs to comes back from. Our kingdom is gripped by a curse, a chapel maid says, near the bottom. Its paths grow wild and dangerous, and though some still attempt the climb to the citadel at its crest, none return to speak of what they see. Hornet, having no other direction, climbs. She is different here. Older. She speaks a great deal where the night never did. She has a voice and opinions and a needle and a thread, and she is furious at first about the cage, and then, slowly, less so, and then, in her way, involved. Rest with her at the bottom, in Bone Bottom, in a small settlement of bone and thread and lamplight, catching her breath after the fall. She is all right. She is always all right. That is the thing about Hornet. Bone Bottom is a hamlet of bone. Pale arches and lanterns and a bell and a handful of gentle bugs who have never left, and a chapel, and it is where Hornet learns the shape of the place she has fallen into. Everything in Pharloom is thread, silk. The whole kingdom is woven, literally, by a higher being called Grandmother Silk, who long ago took the native creatures of the place and evolved them with her silk into the weavers, and told them, the story says, that they were her daughters and divine. And near Bone Bottom, in the moss, Hornet meets Lace. Pale, elegant, quick as a whip, with a rapier and a laugh, a duelist who serves the citadel and finds Hornet interesting and fights her more than once, and is, over the whole climb, sometimes an enemy and sometimes something closer to a rival who would rather not be. Lace is the Hornet of this story, in a way, the fast one who tests the traveler, and the two of them circle each other all the way up. She matters at the very end. Hold her lightly. She is not what she seems, but she is not cruel either. And Bone Bottom fills, as Dirtmouth did, with the people Hornet helps on the way up. There is a whole thread of small tasks, wishes the story calls them, that the bugs of Pharloom ask of her, and if she does enough of them, something changes in her and in the ending. But that is later. For now, the bell in Bone Bottom, and the lamps, and a red traveler setting off up the first slope, with a pale duelist watching from above. Rest in the hamlet of Bone. It is a kind place. Most of the small places in these stories are. Up through Pharloom Hornet goes, and meets its people. Sherma, a small pilgrim with a bell, going up to the citadel on faith, whom Hornet keeps finding at rest stops, praying, and who is one of the gentlest creatures in either game. Chakra, a wandering warrior with a great spear and a map, whom Hornet fights and then does not, and who wanders off to fight something else. Bell ringers and pilgrims, and a whole ascent of small towns clinging to the sides of a kingdom, all of them looking up. And the citadel itself. That is where the truth of the place is. The weavers, Grandmother Silk's daughters, had turned on her long ago and lulled her to sleep and built the citadel on top of her, a whole religion, a system, or a web, the story says, to keep her sealed. She called us daughters, one of them says, at the end of a fight, bitterly. Called us divine. She lied. And then, somehow, in her sleep, the grandmother had reached into the silk woven through every bug in the kingdom and taken hold of it, and that taking hold is the curse, the haunting. And the citadel, panicking, sent its envoys out across the world to gather up every weaver they could find and their descendants, and that is why there was a cage. Hornet, you will notice, does not care much about any of that at first. She wants to go home. She climbs because up is the only way out. But she is Herrah's daughter and the White Lady's ward and the Hive Queen's student, and she was raised in 3 different ways to look after a place, and Pharloom, by the time she reaches its crest, has become a place she looks after. She does not say so. She does the wishes. That is how you can tell. Rest on the climb at one of Sherma's rest stops with the little pilgrim praying softly beside you and a long way still to go up. There is a bench. There is always a bench. Somebody in these kingdoms always leaves a bench. Near the top, Hornet is given something back. A memory. Her own. In pieces, red-lit from before. She is small, in Deepnest, in the webs, and her mother is above her, and her mother is saying the thing I told you already, that she wanted to be remembered not as a queen or a guardian, but only as this. A mother? Before the mask. Before I lay forever in duty. And the memory moves. She is at the hive, a young bug with a needle, and the Hive Queen is teaching her, hard, and she is learning. And the memory moves again. She is in the White Palace, and she is angry, and the White Lady is in front of her, tall and pale, and the child that was raised by 3 queens says the things a child says to the one who was there instead of her mother. And the White Lady does not argue. She shows her something. A small flower, white in the dark. Witness, she says, the first light. The only means we possess to resist that void with which our family is forever linked. Reach forth, child grown strong. Wrest it from this remembrance. Burn yourself free from our sad fate. The Everbloom. The one thing the family has that the dark cannot touch, and she gives it to her. That is the reconciliation, and it happens in a memory years after either of them could have said it out loud, and it is one of the best things in either game. A root queen who was never her mother, and a red child who never asked her to be, and a flower between them. Hold the flower. It is the same white flower a sad old bug in Hallownest asks the knight to carry across the whole kingdom without getting it broken, and it is the same one the Godseeker can be given, and it is, in this whole dark story, the small fragile thing that keeps turning up in the right hands. Sleep on the flower. Somebody is always carrying it very carefully somewhere. At the crest, in the cradle at the heart of the citadel, is Grandmother Silk, asleep and reaching, and Hornet can do one of 2 things. She can bind her, take her down and take her place, and rule Pharloom as its new mistress of thread, and that is one ending, and it is not a bad one. Or, if she has done enough for the people on the way up, if the kingdom has become hers in the other way, she can refuse the throne and build a trap with the caretaker of the place, and spring it, and it does not go as planned. It lets the dark in. The void, the sea from the bottom of the other kingdom, comes up through Pharloom, and the last part of the story begins. Hornet and Lace together at the last in a pit at the bottom of Pharloom that is that kingdom's own abyss, with the black tendrils rising and the Everbloom's light between them, holding the dark back and holding and going out. And then, out of the dark, small pale horned things, vessels, the siblings from the bottom of Hallownest, and among them the night, silent as ever, come all this way, through the dark that joins every deep place to every other, to carry two red and pale sisters up out of the pit, and set them down safe, and go back down, without a word. It never says a word. It only comes when it is needed and goes. I told you the dark had a good ending. That is it. The discarded children of the pit, who were made to be empty and were thrown away for not being empty enough, are the ones who come up out of the black at the very end of the second story to save the daughter of the king who threw them away. Nobody in either kingdom deserves them. They come anyway, rest on the small horned shapes in the dark, going back down, having done the thing in front of them. They will come again if they are needed. That is what they are for now. It is a better purpose than the one they were made for. One last chapter for the ones I want you to carry. Quirrel by the blue lake, having seen enough of the world and found it beautiful. Elderbug by the well, with more windows lit behind him than there were. Sly in his shop, who was once something much greater than a shopkeeper and does not miss it. Iselda at the map counter, and Cornifer humming somewhere below. Bretta writing. Zote on his bench being magnificent about nothing. Mila singing the first time. Cloth brave at last. The nailsmith at the bathhouse learning to sculpt. The dung defender whooping in the sewer, remembering the 5. The 3 Mantis lords, spears grounded, keeping a treaty. The Seer at rest, having said it. The old creature at the edge under the falling ash, who does not mind. The moss people in the green. The jellyfish in the fog. Sherma at her rest stop praying. Lace laughing. And Hornet standing on top of a kingdom that was not hers and is now, with a needle and a thread and a flower, looking down. None of them was chosen. That is the thing I keep coming back to in every one of these stories. The kingdom chose a vessel, and it did not work. What worked was the small people. The old bug who kept a town. The student who came back. The shy bug who wrote things down. The discarded child who did not know why it had returned and returned anyway. Rest with them. They are all still there. The kingdom keeps them the way it keeps everything, under the ground, in soft light, asleep and beautiful, waiting for someone small to walk through and notice. A last landscape chapter, and then good night. I want you to hold the whole of Hallownest at once, the way you can only hold a place you are about to leave. The town on top, with its lamps and its one old bug, the well and the crossroads below it, ferns in the road. The green, with its acid glowing and its moss walking. The fungal deep and the 3 lords on their thrones. The city under the lake, where it rains on the empty bridges and the fountain says, eternal to no one. The mountain singing. The graveyard blue with visible spirits. The fog and the teacher in her glass. The nest dark and warm with a queen dreaming of her daughter. The gardens gone wild. The basin bare with roots reaching for a palace that stepped into a dream. The edge under its endless falling ash. And the pit at the very bottom, the still dark sea and the shells and the lighthouse lit now and the calm. All of it under the ground. All of it asleep. All of it beautiful, in soft light, in rain, for nobody, and now, tonight, for you. It waited 100 years for a small, silent thing to come down the well and walk through it and notice. And it will wait again tomorrow for the next one and the next forever, because it is that kind of kingdom, the kind that does not need you and is glad of you anyway. Rest in the whole of it. Every lamp is lit. Every bench is empty and waiting. The rain has not stopped, and it will not. Stay as long as you like. A chapter about the world outside the kingdom because it belongs here. The first game came out in the early part of a year, made by 3 people, more or less, in a small studio in Australia, and it grew, over the years after, into one of the most loved games ever made, and the people who loved it were promised a second with Hornet, and then they waited. Years. The second game was announced and shown and went quiet and stayed quiet, and the waiting became its own strange culture, a whole community checking every day for news that did not come and making jokes about it and meaning the jokes kindly, mostly, and waiting. And then, in the early autumn of the year before this one, it came out. All at once, everywhere, and it was, the reviews agreed, as good as anyone had hoped and better than most had let themselves believe, and it sold, the wiki records, 7 million copies before the year was out and won the awards it was always going to win. I mention this not because it is lore, but because it is the last chapter of the real story of Hallownest, the one that happens in the world with the lights on. 3 people made a kingdom under the ground. Millions of people went down the well, and they waited patiently for years to be allowed to go down again. That is a kind of devotion the Pale King would have understood. So the kingdom is not empty after all. It is the most visited empty kingdom in the world. Every night, somewhere, someone is at the well in Dirtmouth for the first time. An elder bug is telling them about the town, and they are looking down into the dark. And every night someone is falling out of a broken cage into Pharloom, red and furious, and about to climb. Rest on that. You are one of a very great many tonight going down. It is not a lonely place. It only looks like one. That is the story of the kingdom under the ground, or as much of it as one night can hold. Some of you have been asleep since the well, and some of you are still here, and both are fine, and both were the plan. If you drifted off, the kingdom is exactly where you left it, and it will be there tomorrow, and the story will pick up wherever you like, because every cavern is its own beginning. And if you are still awake, I hope you have something to hold. The old bug by the well, the moss that walks, the singing in the mountain, the 3 lords on their thrones, the flower, the rain. Take one, whichever is closest. Let the rest go dark, 1 lamp at a time, the way the lamps go dark on the bridges of the city under the lake, until there is only the sound of the rain on the fountain, and the fountain saying eternal to no one, and it is, for once, quiet enough to hear. That is your cue. Nothing else is asked of you tonight. Sleep well,